Some mistakes only look obvious after you've already made them. You're watching a channel where we go through real stories from 4chan, told by people who found that out the hard way. What follows starts with curiosity, but the mood shifts into something much heavier. Sit back, dim the room, and don't forget to hit the bell. All right, let's get into the story. The federal facility outside Florence, Colorado, sits at the base of the mountains, and in January, the wind comes down off the ridge with nothing to slow it. That was my second winter working the graveyard rotation, midnight to 8, and by then, I could tell the temperature by how long it took the outer door to close behind me. If it drifted shut slow, it was above 20. If it slammed, we were in single digits. Solitary was its own block. 10 cells, 1 corridor, 1 guard on foot, 1 in the booth. Most nights, nothing happened. You did rounds every 30 minutes, logged the time, checked each window and each door, moved on. The men inside were on 23-hour lockdown, so most of them were asleep or pretending. A few read, a few stared at the wall. The man in cell 4 had been there about a week when he first spoke to me. I never used inmate names in my head. I used the numbers. It was cleaner. 4 had come in from a transfer out of Kentucky. No visitors approved, no phone privileges pending review, no mail yet processed. His file was thinner than most because half of it was still sealed. What I did know was that he was quiet, kept his cell clean, and never asked for anything. That night, first pass around 1 in the morning, he was standing at his door, not pressed against it, just standing a foot back with his hands at his sides, like he was waiting for a bus. "Officer," he said, low voice, not loud enough to carry. I stopped. "You are not supposed to engage on the block after lights out, unless it is medical or a threat." I nodded once, so he would know I heard, and I kept walking. "Diane was a good teacher," he said. "2nd grade. She was patient with you." I did not react on the outside. On the inside, something turned over slowly. My 2nd grade teacher was named Diane. I had not thought about her in maybe 15 years. She wore reading glasses on a chain and let me sit at the back because I was tall for my age. I finished the round without looking back at cell 4. I logged the round. I did not write anything else down. You get all kinds of comments on the block. Guys try to rattle you. They call your wife names they invented. They guess at where you live. They talk about your kids in a general way to see if you flinch. You learn to hear it as weather. This did not feel like weather. This felt like someone reading a sentence from a page. Second pass, 1:30. He was at the door again. "Your dad worked for the county, right? Roads department." I kept moving. He had that limp from the accident on 34. I finished the corridor. In the booth, I told my partner, Marco, that 4 was talking. Marco shrugged and said, "Guys talk." I said this guy is talking specific. Marco looked up from his crossword and asked what he said. I told him. Marco said maybe he read something. I said there is nothing to read. My dad was a foreman on a rural highway crew in a town of 800 people in eastern Washington. There is no article. There is no record online. The accident on 34 happened in 1994, and nobody wrote about it except the county paper, which folded before the internet was a thing anybody used out there. Marco said, "Don't let him get in your head." I said I was not letting him. I was telling him. Third pass, 2 in the morning. 4 was sitting on his bunk this time. He did not look up. He spoke like he was reading a grocery list. "You had a dog named Buddy. He got hit by a truck the summer you turned 11. Your mom buried him behind the shed because your dad was working nights that week, and she didn't want you to wait." I stopped in front of his door. I want to be clear about something. I had never told anyone about that dog. Not my wife, not anyone I served with, not a therapist, because I have never seen one. My mother is the only other person who knew the details, and she has been dead since 2011. There was no headstone. There was no photo I ever posted online. The dog's name was not on any document anywhere. He was a mutt from a neighbor's litter, and we never registered him because we lived out where you didn't need to. I stood there for probably 10 seconds. He did not look at me. He looked at his hands. I finished the corridor, slower than I should have. I logged the round. The rest of the shift he did not speak. He lay on his bunk with his face to the wall and did not move except to breathe. I did 4 more rounds, and each time I passed cell 4, my throat tightened a little more. At shift change, I asked to speak with the lieutenant. I told him the whole thing straight. I did not embellish. I said an inmate in cell 4 had told me my 2nd grade teacher's name, the location of a car accident my father was in, and the name of a dog I had as a child that had never been published or discussed with anyone still alive. I said I wanted a review. The lieutenant did not laugh. He wrote it down. That was the part that scared me, honestly, more than the shift itself. He wrote it down, and he did not push back, and he told me to go home and come back tomorrow. I did not sleep much. I sat at my kitchen table in the dark with a glass of water, and I ran through every place that information could have leaked. There was no place. I had scrubbed my own footprint years ago when I got the job. No social media, no public records under my current address. My wife used her maiden name for most things. My kid was homeschooled through 8th grade. By buddy, I could not account. I went in the next night. I was told cell 4 was on communication restriction, and I would not be doing that corridor for the foreseeable future. I got put on the general block, West Wing, and I did not ask questions. The investigation took about 3 weeks. They pulled his file the rest of the way open. They pulled visitor logs from his previous facility. They pulled his phone records going back a year, mail, everything. They interviewed his lawyer. They interviewed the transport officers. What came out of it, in the version they were willing to tell me, was this. Before his arrest, the man in cell 4 had been a licensed psychologist, not a hack, a credentialed one, with a specialty they called open source intake, which, as far as I understood it, meant he had spent years teaching corporate clients how to build a profile on a person, using only public information and a few well-placed conversations. He was very good at it. He had testified as an expert witness. He had published in the field. What he had done, in the month before he was transferred to Florence, was pay attention. He knew the name of every new hire on the intake list, because he had contacts on the outside who could pull that list. For each new hire, he ran a workup. Family, hometown, school records where accessible, neighbors, church rolls, obituaries. The kind of thing a good investigator can piece together in a weekend if they know where to look. He stored everything in his head, because he could. He had been tested at some point, and the number was high enough that they mentioned it in the report. When he arrived on our block, he had a folder in his mind on every officer who worked solitary. He used it the way a boxer uses a jab, just enough to see how you moved. That is the explanation. That is what the lieutenant told me, and that is what I put in my own report and signed. It accounts for the teacher. It accounts for the road accident, because my dad's name was in a county paper archive that got digitized in 2016, and if you knew what county to look in, you could find it. It accounts for the tone. It accounts for the way he timed the comments to my rounds. I have thought about it a lot since then, and it accounts for everything, except one thing. The dog was never published. The dog was buried by my mother, behind a shed on a property that no longer belongs to my family. The dog's name was not on a tag, because he did not have a collar. My mother is dead. Every neighbor from that street is dead or moved. I have not spoken the name out loud to another human being since I was 12 years old. I asked the lieutenant, near the end, whether the investigators had asked him about the dog specifically. He said they had. He said the man in cell 4 had smiled and said, and I am quoting the lieutenant here, "Sometimes you get lucky with a guess." I did not go back on that corridor. I put in for a transfer to a facility closer to my wife's mother, and I got it that summer. I do not work nights anymore. I work an intake desk on days, and I like it fine. Every so often, and not on any schedule, I will be doing something ordinary, driving home, standing at the sink, and I will hear that flat voice saying the name. And I will think about the shed behind the house that is not ours anymore. And I will think about who else could possibly have been there that summer, watching my mother in the yard with a shovel that I never knew about. I do not have an answer. I am not looking for one. I moved into Alex's apartment in Phoenix on the second Sunday of February 2022, off Camelback Road, 3rd floor, one of those beige stucco complexes with a pool nobody uses because half the year it's too hot, and the other half, nobody's home. We'd been dating almost a year, long distance, and this was supposed to be the part where the hard part ended. He helped carry my boxes up the stairs. He was on shift the next morning, so it was mostly a quick dinner from the taco place on the corner, half a beer each, and he was out by 6 the next day, 12-hour shift at the hospital. He kissed me on the forehead and told me to make the place mine. That's what I was doing when I found it. The apartment was already mostly set up. He'd lived there 3 years, and he wasn't a messy guy, just a guy. 2 bookshelves, a leather couch that had seen better days, a TV that was too small for the wall it was mounted on. The bedroom had 1 dresser, his, and 1 closet, half empty. He'd cleared out that half for me. Even printed a little note and put it on the top drawer, yours, with a heart. I was moving my folded stuff into the bottom drawer when I noticed it stuck. Something was catching in the back. I pulled harder, reached in, and my hand closed around fabric. It was a bra, black, lace across the cups. Not mine. Definitely not mine. I'm a solid 2 cup sizes smaller. I sat back on the carpet and just held it for a minute. Okay. He'd lived alone 3 years, so this had to be old. From before. He probably shoved it in there when he was cleaning up for me and forgot. Guys do that. I've seen my brother clean by opening a drawer and just pushing things into it. I put it on the bed and kept unpacking, except the tag was still on it. Not the price tag, the little care tag. And the fabric didn't smell like a drawer that had sat closed for 3 years. It smelled faintly like laundry detergent. Not his detergent. I'd already done a load with his. Something floral. I told myself I was reading too much into it. New apartment nerves. Big move nerves. I've been an anxious kid and I could still work myself into a corner if I wasn't careful. I made myself coffee. I sat on the balcony for a bit. The Phoenix sky in February is that hard blue you get when the air is dry and cold at the same time. And there was a woman in the courtyard talking to her dog like it owed her money. The dog was a corgi with a bandana. I watched them for a while. Then I went back inside. I decided to finish unpacking. If I stopped now, I'd spiral. The next thing I found was in the second drawer of his nightstand. I was looking for a spot to keep my night guard, the little plastic case, and I opened the drawer and there was a hair tie. One of those thick ones with a little cloth bow on it. The bow was pale pink. There was a strand of long, dark hair caught in it. My hair is red and short. I picked it up and put it on the bed next to the bra. Then I sat down and just looked at both of them. Alex's last serious girlfriend, according to him, was in college, 6 years ago. He said he'd dated here and there, but nothing serious since he moved to Phoenix. 3 years. He'd told me that maybe 50 times, in different ways. Over FaceTime, over text, in person when I visited in October. 3 years single. 3 years alone in this apartment. I stood up. My legs felt weird. Not scared weird, something else. Like I'd already known something and was just now catching up with myself. I opened the closet, his side. I started going through the shelves. Behind a stack of folded hoodies on the top shelf, there was a small zippered pouch. Not his style, pale blue, cloth. I unzipped it. Tampons, a hair clip, a half-empty tube of hand cream, the kind with the pump top. I unscrewed it and smelled it. Same floral thing as the bra. I closed the closet. I walked out to the living room. I stood in the middle of it and looked around at the apartment like I was seeing it for the first time. There was a candle on the bookshelf I hadn't paid attention to. Vanilla, half burned. Alex doesn't burn candles. He says the smell gives him a headache. There was a mug in the back of the cabinet with a cartoon fox on it that I'd assumed was ironic. It wasn't the kind of thing he'd buy. I got down on my hands and knees and looked under the bed. There was a shoebox back there, against the wall on the far side, the side of the bed nobody uses. I had to lie flat to reach it. I dragged it out. Inside was a curling iron, a little makeup bag, a paperback novel with a receipt from a Barnes & Noble in Tempe as a bookmark. I checked the receipt, November 12th, 2021, 3 months ago. I put everything back in the box exactly the way I found it. I slid the box back to where it had been. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. I could hear the fridge cycling on and off. I could hear kids in the pool that supposedly nobody uses. I remember thinking, someone is using it. I called Alex. He answered fast, which was unusual for him at work. He sounded happy. He asked how I was doing, how the unpacking was going. I said, "Can you come home?" He said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Please, just come home." He was there in 40 minutes. He must have found someone to cover the rest of his shift. He walked in still wearing his scrubs and the little clip-on ID badge, and he saw me sitting on the couch with the bra and the hair tie and the pouch and the shoebox lined up on the coffee table in front of me. He didn't say anything. He sat down in the chair across from me. He looked at the stuff on the table. Then he looked at his hands. Then he looked at the wall behind me. That took maybe 2 minutes. 2 full minutes where neither of us said anything, and I could hear the hum of the AC and a car alarm going off in the parking lot. And I remember thinking, whatever he says next is going to be the thing I have to live with. He said, "Her name is Kayla." I waited. He said they'd broken up in November, that he'd told me he was single for 3 years because when we'd started talking, when we'd started getting serious, it had been true. Kayla had moved in the July before I met him, and they'd tried it, and it hadn't worked. She moved out the week of Thanksgiving. She'd left things behind. He'd meant to text her about them. He'd meant to box them up. He kept not doing it. Not to hide anything from me, he said, just because if he boxed them up, he had to see her again, and he didn't want to see her again. I asked him why he hadn't just told me. He said, "Because you were already scared to move here." That was true. I had been. He said, "I know how it looks. I know exactly how it looks. I'm sorry." I didn't say anything for a while. I looked at the shoebox on the table. The corner was crushed a little, like someone had stepped on it or dropped something on it at some point. I remember focusing on that crushed corner and thinking about how much of a person's life you leave behind in the corners of other people's apartments without ever meaning to. I told him I needed a few days. I stayed in the apartment. He offered to go stay with his friend Marcus, and he did, for 4 nights. I slept in the bed alone. I ate cereal at the counter. I walked around the block in the evening when it cooled off. I thought about it a lot. I thought about whether not telling me was the same as lying. I thought about whether I would have done the same thing in his place, and I honestly wasn't sure. I called my sister once and got about halfway through the story before I realized I didn't want anyone else's opinion on it. I told her something else was bothering me, made something up. On the 5th day, I told him he could come home, and I told him I wanted her to come get her stuff, all of it, that I wasn't going to be the one to pack it up, and I wasn't going to live around it. He texted her. She agreed. They set a time for that Saturday, 2 in the afternoon. I told Alex I'd go out during it. I didn't want to meet her. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted the apartment to be ours. Saturday came. I left at 1:30. I walked down to the coffee shop on the corner, and I sat there for about an hour and a half, reading the same paragraph of a book over and over. When I came back, I got out of the elevator on the 3rd floor at exactly the wrong moment. She was in the hallway, standing outside our door. She had a cardboard box in her arms, taped shut, and a tote bag hanging off her shoulder. Long, dark hair, shorter than I expected. She looked tired. We saw each other. We both stopped for a second. She knew who I was, and I knew who she was, and neither of us pretended otherwise. Then we both just kept walking. She toward the elevator, me toward the door. We passed close enough that I could smell her hand cream. Neither of us said anything. Not a word. That was almost 3 years ago. Alex and I are still together. We moved out of that apartment last spring, got a bigger place further north, closer to the mountains. I don't know where Kayla is, and I don't want to know. I remember walking past her feeling like I owed her something, an apology maybe, though I don't know what for. But if either of us had opened our mouth, tried to make it into something, I don't think we both would have walked out of that hallway. So we didn't, and that turned out to be the right call. If you drive a rig for a living, you learn to sleep in weird places. Truck stops with no showers, industrial lots behind gas stations, that gravel patch outside a village where 3 other trucks are already parked, and nobody knows who the land belongs to. You get used to it. The one I picked that night was off the S8, somewhere between Wrocław and Lodz. I'd left Prague around noon, hit border traffic near Náchod, and by the time I got past Wrocław, my eyes were burning. The delivery in Warsaw wasn't until Monday morning. I had time. So I pulled in around 11, cut the engine, ate a cold sandwich, and climbed into the bunk. The lot wasn't much, maybe 8 or 9 trucks, half of them with curtains drawn. One sodium lamp on a leaning pole, another one dead. A small building with a payphone that hadn't worked in years. No cameras that I could see. I fell asleep fast, curtains closed, boots off, phone charging on the dash. What woke me up was a metal sound, not loud, just wrong. The kind of small clank you get when someone puts a tool against a lock and it doesn't fit clean the first time. I opened my eyes and lay there, didn't move. That's the first rule when something feels off at a stop. You don't sit up, you don't turn on a light, you listen. The second sound was footsteps. 2 people, definitely 2. One of them said something in what I think was Polish, low, 1 word. The other didn't answer. I turned my head very slowly toward the passenger side window and pulled the corner of the curtain back with 2 fingers, maybe a centimeter, just enough. There was a van parked next to my trailer. Dark color, no logo, back doors open. I hadn't heard it come in, which meant they'd rolled in with the engine off, or I'd slept through it, and I don't sleep through much. 2 guys, 1 tall, 1 short, both in dark jackets, hoods up but not pulled tight. Working clothes, not tactical stuff. The tall one had a small flashlight in his mouth, the kind you clip onto a keychain. He was crouched by the rear door of my trailer, doing something to the lock. I use a padlock and a plastic seal from the shipper, nothing fancy. The tall guy had the padlock off in maybe 40 seconds. Didn't cut it, just opened it, like he had the key or a copy that was close enough. He set the padlock on the ground next to his boot so it wouldn't roll. I remember thinking, very clearly, that this was the part where you hit the horn, grab the panic button, get on the radio. I didn't do any of that, because the second guy had already turned toward my cab and was just standing there, not looking at anything specific, just standing, hands in his pockets, watching the row of trucks like he was on break. And I understood, in the way you understand things when you're too scared to think in words, that if I made a sound, he would know exactly which truck it came from. They opened the trailer. I heard the bar swing and the door go up on the runners, that slow squeak mine makes because I keep meaning to grease it. Then quiet, for maybe 2 minutes. I saw the tall one when he came back to the van. He pulled something out of the back of it, a crate, wooden, banded, about the size of a big microwave, heavy from how he carried it. He walked it into my trailer and I heard him set it down softly, not dropped, set, like a man who did not want to leave a mark. He came back and did it again, and again, and again. 4 crates, I counted. The short one never moved. Once he coughed into his elbow. Once he looked at his phone, and the light lit up the underside of his hood, and I saw part of his face for half a second. Beard, dark, nothing you'd remember in a lineup. He put the phone away. When the tall one was done, he closed my trailer. He put the padlock back on. He clicked it shut. Then he took something out of his pocket, and I watched him fit a new plastic seal onto the door, in the exact spot where the old one was. He must have cut the old one and pocketed it. I never heard the snip. They got in the van. The short one closed the back doors, quietly, one at a time. The engine started and barely made a sound, and they rolled out of the lot with no headlights until they were on the road. I lay there for maybe an hour. I'm not exaggerating. I watched the ceiling of the bunk and listened to my own breathing and the hum of the fridge, and I did not move. Around 5, when the sky started going that dirty gray it goes in March, I sat up. My hands were fine. That surprised me. I'd expected them to shake, and they didn't. I put my boots on. I climbed down. My breath came out white, and there was frost on the mirrors. I walked around to the back of the trailer. The padlock was on. The seal was on. If I hadn't been awake for it, I would have signed the paperwork in Warsaw and gone home and never known. I stood there for a long time with my hand on the door. Here's the thing. My load out of Prague was building insulation, foam panels, light stuff, stacked on pallets, filling maybe 2/3 of the trailer. Whatever they'd put in there was in the back corner, behind my pallets. And if a customs guy did a quick look at the front, he'd see the panels and wave me through. Nobody unpacks foam insulation. I opened the door. The panels were exactly where I'd left them. Same shrink wrap, same corner scuffs. I climbed up inside and walked past them. My boots made too much noise on the metal floor. The 4 crates were in the back corner, stacked 2 and 2. Plain wood, no markings, banded with black plastic strapping, sealed with what looked like fresh silicone along the seams. I put my hand on one. It was cold, colder than the trailer, which didn't make sense until I realized they'd come out of the van, and the van had been outside for hours. I didn't try to open them. I closed the trailer, put my own padlock back on next to their new seal, and I climbed back into the cab and I sat there. I called my dispatcher first. A woman named Ola runs the desk on night shift. I told her what happened. Flat, no drama. She was quiet for maybe 5 seconds, then said, "Do not drive. Do not touch anything else. I'm calling the police. You call them too, on the local number, so it's on both sides." I called 112. My Polish is bad, but they had someone who spoke English within a minute. I told them the lot, the road, my plates. They said, "Stay in the cab. Do not open the trailer again. Do not talk to anyone who approaches you." Nobody approached me. The lot was already emptying out for the morning run. 2 trucks left while I sat there. A 3rd guy walked past with a paper cup of coffee and didn't even look up. The police came in about 40 minutes. 2 cars, no sirens. An older officer with gray hair took my paperwork and looked at it for a long time without saying anything. Then he walked around my trailer twice. He touched the new seal with one gloved finger, turned to his partner and said something quiet in Polish. His partner got on the radio. They opened the crates on the lot, right there. I stood off to the side by one of the cruisers and watched. Car parts, engine control units, module boards, a few metal housings I didn't recognize, everything wrapped in oiled paper. The older officer picked up one of the housings and turned it under the light, and I could see, from where I was standing, that the serial number had been ground down to bare metal. He put it back in the crate carefully. He looked at me for a second, not unkindly, and then he looked away. They took me to a station in a town whose name I didn't catch. 6 hours in a room with bad coffee and a translator who apologized for her English, which was better than mine. I told the same story 9 times. They asked if I recognized the van, the men, the voices. I said no. They asked if anyone at the shipper in Prague had said anything strange. I said no. They asked if I always parked at that lot. I said I'd never been there before in my life. That part seemed to matter to them. Around 2, they gave me my phone back and my paperwork, and a printout with a case number on it, and told me I could go. The older officer walked me out to the yard. My truck was there. The trailer was empty. They'd kept the panels. He shook my hand. He said, in slow English, "You did the correct thing. Do not tell people about this." I said okay. I drove the empty truck back toward the border. Ola called me around Katowice and said the Warsaw run was going to another driver and I should come home. She didn't say why, and I didn't ask. I still do the job. Different company now. I park at truck stops with cameras and I pay for the good ones. The part I think about is not the crates. It's the short one, standing there with his hands in his pockets, watching the row of trucks. Because he wasn't guarding the tall one. He was waiting to see which curtain moved. I didn't move mine. That's the only reason I'm typing this. Alright everyone, that's the end of this one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you're enjoying these 4chan breakdowns, make sure to subscribe. Some stories feel distant until one detail reminds you of your own street, your own room, or your own routine. That's when they start to stick. I'll see you in the next video.